Reimagining Success, episode 236.
You're listening to the Reimagining Success podcast, where we help you design a business and a life that allows you freedom from the 9 to 5. I'm your host, Anna Lundberg, ex-corporate good girl, now a business mentor and coach, author, mum of 2, and I'm here to help you create more freedom, flexibility, and fulfillment. Now let's get started with redefining success outside of the 9 to 5.
Hello there and welcome back to what I think will be a short episode, but a really special and nostalgic one for me, because today, as you listen to this episode, I believe, if I've got my batch creating correct and scheduling, it is exactly 10 years to the day since I headed off on my sabbatical to South America to travel by myself for 3 months, shouting to anybody who'd listen, adventure is out there. So I don't know if you've seen Disney's Up, but the first 5 minutes, if you don't watch any of the rest of it, is the most beautiful, poignant cinematography, if that's the right word, but the most beautiful 5 minutes of any film I've ever seen, and I cry every time I watch it. So that's just an aside. But I think that came out around the time that I was planning my trip, and so that became the theme for me. I think it was my first ever blog post, because I started my blog, which then became my professional blog and business platform ultimately over time, and that was the genesis. And so I just wanted a little bit of, if you could allow me, a little bit of nostalgia, a little bit of sentimentality, but with a, hopefully powerful and valuable message about the magic of having the time and space to explore and to reflect. So, little brief history in case you're not familiar with my story. Why would you be if you're new to my community? And even if you're an oldie, you probably don't think about me as much as I think you do. So let me remind you, I studied, let's go all the way back to there, to university, PPE, Philosophy, Politics, Economics. I did an International Relations Masters then in Geneva after doing my undergraduate and Masters at Oxford, mainly because I didn't know what I wanted to do next. And that was just another way to kind of put off the decision. I did a few internships at the UNDP, at different NGOs and so on. And I wanted to do some obviously incredibly important kind of not-for-profit organizations or UN work. I ended up, as the story goes, in the private sector, working in marketing for perfumes at Procter & Gamble. And I always like to say this, and it's very much true, I had a really amazing experience. The people I met there, the things I learned, it was the best marketing, professional, time management, writing, I don't know what else, school. And it has opened up all the doors, I'd say, that have come since. Not just because my whole business now is based on the fact that I quit that job, but actually because of the incredible network, the things I learned and the confidence and the frameworks and all sorts of things, right? So I did have an amazing time. However, I studied something totally different. I was never, incredibly passionate. I see some of my colleagues still working and they're amazing. They're so creative. They're so passionate about their perfumes and so on. And I think, wow, that just wasn't me at the time. So there was a disconnect for me. And I'd done a design role on what we called our lifestyle brand. So one of our cheaper, younger brands. I'd done what we call a delivery role. I still say delivery role, which was more of a commercial media focused role on a luxury brand, so higher end. And then I've been promoted to brand manager and specialized in digital marketing. And digital was a very in-demand skill, as of course it is now, but everything is digital now. And I became kind of an internal consultant. I was quite siloed, as digital was and sometimes still is, in fact, in the organization. I didn't have a huge amount of I didn't have really a formal team and manager and so on who was sort of dedicated to me. And so ultimately, I think that sort of contributed to me, kind of being, I don't want to say pushed out, but certainly sort of leaked out. That's a lovely picture, isn't it? So I think if I had wanted to stay and if the company wanted to keep me, there would have been things we could all have done differently. But as it was the best decision of my life. But it started with this decision to take my sabbatical. So I think it was one of those things, we always talk about things to people and we say, I really want to go travel across South America. And people will say, do it. And other people would say, don't do it. You're going to die. Because a lot of people thought it was very dangerous. And it was. But that's the story for another time. But it was the most incredible experience. And I think I had, this is really taking me back because this really was 10 years ago, and it was over 10 years ago. I had a lunch because I'm bearing my soul here, so I hope no one knows who I'm talking about here. And it's totally irrelevant, but there you go. I've been recording 8 podcast episodes, so the truth will come out now today. So in the cafeteria where we worked, we'd often go on sort of lunch dates with people. And there was a guy I fancied a bit, and he was new, and I thought, I'm going to get out of my comfort zone. I'm going to ask him for lunch. And we did go, and he was very lovely. And I think he was just asking me about something I was talking about. I wanted to write a book and I want to travel South America. And I'm going to credit my entire career pivot to this hot guy at work. You don't know who you are. Who somehow, and I forget the exact words, but somehow was, because he was new and he didn't know me, he basically prompted me to say basically, oh, great, well, why aren't you doing that? And so off I went, inspired by my crush from work, to ask my boss for a sabbatical. And because I was in this no man's land, I was sort of at the end of my digital role, there wasn't an obvious next step for me. It actually worked out really well for the company. So she said yes. So, off I went. 1st of May, June, July. The month before was the most stressful of my life. I was packing up my flat because basically I had decided, even though I wasn't quitting my job, I basically packed up and handed back, as you do in Switzerland, my apartment. I put my stuff into storage. I got rid of my cats because I'd been really allergic to my cats for a few years, so that was the right thing to do. Dusty and Luna, they were called, and they were rebranded Siegfried and Brunhild, I believe, by the quite eccentric, lovely man who took them. I hope they're okay. They're probably not okay now, are they, 10 years later? And I was also performing in Chicago. I was the understudy of Thingamajiggy, whatever the main character's called, Roxy. And so I was learning the whole role, but I was also one of the murderesses. I'm trying to think which one I was now. I think, anyway, I'll think about that later. I won't waste your time with any more of my anecdotes. But as I told you, I did say it was going to be a sentimental episode today. So I was doing Chicago. I actually had a really bad migraine halfway through our dress rehearsal. I burst into tears, and I'm not in any of the photos from the second act from that because I had to head home. It was awful. But positives of all this, I did Chicago. It was amazing. It was my last show, so it's also 10 years since I did my big musical show, my theatre, which I really miss. It's just not quite a priority for me in my life at the moment, but I will make time for it again. And off I went to travel. So I was packing up my flat. My amazing friend Stanley, he was in the theatre group, really helped me pack up the flat like late at night after one of the rehearsals as well. And I stayed with him and his wife the night before I left, and off I went early in the morning. Got a photo of me there looking quite tired, heading off to Ecuador. So I started in Quito. My dad actually joined me for a couple of weeks. We went sailing in the Galapagos. You can tell that I had money in those days to do all these things. I had a lot of money savings from living quite a cheap life and with a very generous salary from my corporate days. And this was a huge... So, I mean, this feels very privileged, and I apologise, but it was obviously after years of working hard. I didn't have any obligations. I didn't have children, didn't have a mortgage, etc. I didn't even have a car. I had a really cheap flat and so on. So not for any... like incredible saving power that I had or anything, but I did have money to spend on this. So we did that. I wanted to go to Machu Picchu. That was the kind of adventures out there from up. And so I did the 4-day Inca Trail hike. Also did the Salar de Uyuni, I don't know what accent that was. A bit of a mix of Swedish, Spanish, in Bolivia. And basically went to 8 countries in 3 months. I would love to go. I sort of just dipped into Brazil and didn't want to spend too much time there because I knew that Brazil required much more time. So I'd love to go back to Brazil another time. Spent quite a bit of time in Argentina, Peru. Paraguay, had a not so good experience there. Uruguay, Chile. Is that it? Bolivia, I mentioned. And Ecuador, of course. I got my Panama hat, which is not called a Panama hat, in size XXL there in Ecuador and so on. So... enough with the reminiscing. I want to just to have a point to this episode, talk a little bit about what that time gave me, time, space, that whole experience. So it obviously basically gave me confidence that I could travel by myself because people, including people from South America, said, oh, that's really dangerous. Are you sure you should do that? You know, and I got by with my little Spanish that I've been learning, and it was amazing. I don't know if I would do that now, get on all these random buses, take taxis in the dark and pretty much hitchhiking and all these dodgy things I was doing. So, you know, also because I did have quite a few hairy experiences. it introduced me to people outside of my bubble, and this was huge. The people I met had totally different life experiences. They were young, they were old, they were single, they were married, they were divorced, children, no children, retired, unemployed, very much outside of my immediate circle. And this is the biggest reason why this kind of trip is so powerful for you, because you're going to meet people who aren't in that same, for me, kind of academic corporate space, right? You're going to meet incredibly interesting people who may or may not, somebody was working on a potato farm. That wasn't necessarily what I wanted to do, but it certainly opened my eyes to different possibilities. So that was huge. It gave me access to these bucket list adventures. And in fact, I watched the film The Bucket List with Jack Nicholson and Morgan Freeman, and that was what inspired me to write my 100 Things to Do Before You Die list, which I think still is one of my top performing blog posts. I've still kept it, even though it's not quite relevant to my business anymore. And in fact, even some of the bucket list things on there they're very travel focused, I think, and some of them probably aren't so meaningful to me anymore. So I probably should revisit that. But the interesting thing is it's less valuable for me now because I'm living more in alignment with where I want to be. At the time, writing a bucket list and writing these aspirational goals really helped to nudge me out of my comfort zone, to get me working towards things that were really important to me again, and to go on adventures and things. That was huge. I obviously read a lot of books. I had my Kindle with me. I read blogs. I don't think I knew about podcasts, or even if there were podcasts in those days, but I immersed myself in sort of personal development, career decisions, and so on. And above all, it was just a break, right? After years of school and university, and I did actually take a year off after uni as well, but I did a lot of work then, and all this work at the big corporate company. So, time and space to explore is massive. And so my encouragement to you, and this is especially if you're at the beginning of, hesitating about maybe quitting your job, starting a side hustle, maybe you've been made redundant or have that on the cards, you might be taking a package. Maybe if you and your partner have wanted to do this for a long time, I don't know, but start with potentially even a day off, right? It doesn't have to be 3 months, 6 months, a year. You don't have to quit your job and move to Bali, as I always kind of say, a bit tongue in cheek. A day off, a weekend away, a week if you can. It could be solo. It could be a structured retreat organised by a coach or something. I mean, I've wanted to do that. I haven't really found any good ones, so I'm quite tempted to organise my own, but I know it's a lot of work. But, getting out of your usual environment, meeting other people, having some time and space for yourself. Of course, if you can, a longer sabbatical is amazing. I just spoke to someone on LinkedIn who has quit their job, in fact, and gone off, and isn't, thinking about the next step yet. And if you can have that, that's incredible. But certainly even a weekend or a week away is amazing. And it's not just a holiday. You've got it, you're doing it sort of for the more, with more intention, I guess, to give yourself this time to explore. And I can give you exercises and I have question prompts and so on, but at the most basic, I'd really encourage you then during that time to listen to podcasts, to read books, to journal, to reflect, right? To learn something new and to do something you always wanted to do. Worst case, you come out of this and you've ticked off one of those bucket list things, right? That you've always wanted to do. And for me, what happened is halfway through that sabbatical, the 3 months, my boss and HR called me up about the next assignment. It wasn't inspiring. I felt really tense about the idea. I talked to everybody who would speak to me and I tried to get advice from friends and parents and family and so on. And ultimately, I went with my scariest, most instinctive, intuitive, least kind of rational decision I ever made, which was then to quit my job. And I tried to get some gardening leave. My previous HR director actually said that I would be able to. I didn't get anything at all in the end. I know a lot of, and I'm a bit bitter about this, but it's so long ago now. I had colleagues who quit and got an amazing package and then used that to start a business and so on. In Switzerland, unemployment is super generous, but I was very much, it was more the principle of the thing. I wanted to draw a line. I left the country. I didn't take the unemployment. I didn't get any package and so on, right? So it wasn't the most sound financial decision, but it was the right thing for me emotionally, spiritually, whatever you want to call it. And I'll probably come back. I'll definitely come out later in the year with my 10 years since I actually quit my job, because I guess officially that's sort of, I don't know if we count September, October, but watch this space for maybe a mini podcast series of what I've learned over the last 10 years later in the year. But that was huge for me. I don't think I would, and I'm pretty sure I wouldn't have been able to just quit my job just like that, from being in a comfortable corporate job to quitting my job. It was a series of fortuitous events, going for a lunch date with the hot guy, asking for the sabbatical, being then away. That was my one step outside my comfort zone. See what I did there? That's my brand name, One Step Outside, business name. One step was to go traveling. Then the next step was to quit the job. Then I did actually 2 years of consulting. Then I discovered coaching, et cetera, right? So, again, if you're at the beginning of the journey, sorry to put you off, but there will be some twists and turns and it won't look exactly as you thought. If you're further on, you'll know that already. And hopefully it's reassuring that it does just take longer sometimes than you think. Some people are very lucky and they fall into things. I certainly landed on my feet with my digital marketing and was very successful financially in those 2 years, but I then kind of quit that to get even more freedom, flexibility and fulfillment as I wanted. What I'm discovering now, of course, is that it's not just about the big dramatic breaks and travels. So in the subsequent years when I was doing the consulting, I did huge lucrative consulting contracts. In fact, this sounds very appealing right now. And then in between, I'd go off. I went to Malaysia, Kuala Lumpur. I stayed in Marina Bay Sands, as that was called, Marina Sands Bay, the amazing, boat kind of infinity pool hotel in Singapore. I saw friends in Melbourne and Sydney. Sydney's like one of my favorite places in the world. I went to New Zealand with a friend who was living there for 2 years with her boyfriend, now husband, father to her lovely son. And we went on a road trip around the North Island. I did a road trip, my aunt, along the Californian coast. I'm just dreaming back to these incredible few years. I paddleboarded down the Mississippi and down the Thames and all sorts, right? We whitewater rafted down the Grand Canyon River and we flew in helicopter and I flew in a plane that my friend Ali had incredibly was able to pilot somehow, and I dared to go with him. All these incredible things, but that's so long ago now actually, and it's not about necessarily those big things, and that's kind of a closed chapter. But I also have that kind of adventurous hippie inside of me. In fact, when I was initially starting my blog, I was playing around with names like, I think, hippie with a handbag, or, hippie in heels or something, because that was a juxtaposition of the two aspects of me. As a mother now, I use that as a bit of an excuse. I'm aware of that the big adventures aren't so possible, but I've done a few trail runs. We can go camping for a weekend, maybe some paddleboarding, hopefully with the kids as they get older. And I'm hoping to bring back those little adventures, little retreats, little spa weekend with a friend. Maybe I'll do a writing retreat at some point as well. So it doesn't have to be, if you're not in the position that I was in, a very fortunate position at the time financially, initially with my job and then with my consulting contracts, to go through this very expensive, adventurous phase, but we can do little things that aren't so expensive that still create a lot of space and time. So there you go. Thank you for sticking with me through what was, I don't even know what to call that, nostalgic, sentimental, privileged stream of consciousness about my sabbatical. It was nice. Thank you for allowing me to dwell on my memories. It was the most incredible thing and it opened up everything that's happened since. But again, in case you're not convinced, taking time off, whether it's a day, a weekend, a week, a month, longer, if you have that opportunity. And I get this again and again with clients, by the way, who did my incubator and then want to launch straight and, they've quit their job and they want to join the accelerator and they want to, push. They actually realize, I need a bit of a break. They've been in that job for a decade or more. Again, like me, school, university, and so on, and they need some time. I've got a couple of clients I'm thinking of now who are living similarly adventurous lives as well, and maybe more simple life as well. It might be temporary, it might be ongoing forever. So, give yourself a break if you get the opportunity, or in fact, if you can take the opportunity, do it. If you've done it, if you are going to do it, if you want any more information or inspiration or any of those things, I've got questions and exercises you can explore, books to recommend and all sorts. I'll share with you my bucket list if you want. Just email me podcast@onestepoutside.com, or you can connect with me on Instagram, Facebook, LinkedIn, wherever we're connected. So thanks for allowing me this indulgent episode. We'll be back with more of a typical one next week. But here's to sabbaticals and taking time off. Here's to the ongoing journey. Thanks so much for listening. I'll see you next week. Bye for now.
Thanks for listening to Reimagining Success with Anna Lundberg. You can find my book, Leaving the Corporate 9 to 5, Stories from People Who've Done It and How You Can Too, in paperback and Kindle format on your local Amazon site. I hope it gives you both inspiration and concrete tips on how you can craft your own alternative career path. Happy reading.